A very good evening, a warm welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine, presented by Pick and Pay. And if I'm looking both rather orange and slightly ski-like, that's because this is from my ski collection, which is the extent to which I have had to go through my wardrobe to find stuff to ward off this rather nasty Johannesburg winter that has descended upon us with fury and vitriol and is ensuring that it is a rather cold spell we're having at the moment. So I'm being warmed up by some ski gear, but also being warmed up by some fabulous wine and some wonderful guests through the course of this evening as we kick off another week of celebrating the wider world of wine. And it is a wider world tonight because the second half of the show involves a fair dose of food. This Thursday evening, one of my favorite chefs, Freddie down at Séjour at the Houghton, is going to be presenting a Portuguese dinner, and he's roped in his mate Anton with a whole pile of Portuguese wine for a night that promises to give a rather good toast to Portugal Day. I'm not sure if it's exactly Thursday, but it's certainly there or thereabouts, and celebrating Portuguese wine, Portuguese food, Portuguese culture at Séjour. So ahead of that, I shall be there very excitedly. It is the opportunity to taste some of that wine tonight and to throw forward to dinner. It still has a couple of spots open, so you might be able to get hold of one of them if that dinner has appeal. So Freddie and Anton are with me just a little later on in the show. And in a moment, one of the most exciting young wine talents on the planet. And I say that very deliberately because quite simply, she is. And I'm going to introduce her very shortly. Before I do that, though, a couple of things to remind you of. If you missed it last week, it's still up. I'll look at the brand new vintage of the Epicurean as Mutlemo talks me through it, as well as talks through his story and how together with Mbazima Shilowa and Moss and Gosheng, they put together wine that's made down at Rupert and Rothschild, and that in small quantities has already got a more than cult following. You can find out more about them, their story, and what that new vintage is like from my interview at Marble. That is up and online at the moment. Later this week, Thursday evening, I catch up with Michael Fridge on. We're having a look at the Old Mutual Wine Trophy. Judging finished last week. I think he's just come around, and we'll find out how that worked and how wine is looking from Michael's perspective. And he's always a very honest judge of the times we're in wine-wise. And I'll also be speaking to some members of the Cape Winemakers Guild Protégé scheme. The young protégés are coming through the next generation of fine winemakers. And that leads us very nicely into our first guest, because she has come through exactly that program, from a kid in Mitchell's Plain, where the thoughts of becoming a winemaker were certainly not shared by many, to her status now as the winemaker at Brookdale, making quite simply some fantastic wine. So it gives me a great deal of pleasure, finally long overdue, to have her on Dan Really Likes Wine. A very good evening, Kiara Scott. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so very much, Dan. It's a great privilege to be here on your show. So thank you very much for having myself and Brookdale Wines here with you this evening. Yeah, very exciting.
We have spoken online before, because you did join us for one of our South African Wine Tribe events in the UK with Greg Sherwood. But first time here, and the opportunity to tell what is one of the coolest stories in South African wine at the moment. And I love it because it is so inspirational. Because if we look back to where Kiara was not that long ago, because as people can see from the video, Kiara's only just turned 19. We don't have to go back that to a time when you were a kid, you're in Mitchell's Plain, you weren't surrounded by a whole lot of hope. It wasn't a place that was full of optimism and happiness and joy. It was a really difficult place to grow up. And most of the attractions were attractions that tended to lead you down fairly dark paths. And yet somehow you decided, my escape route out of here is going to be through winemaking. And I'm fascinated about that, both in just how on earth did you come around to that idea, but also in an area where you saw so much substance abuse, so much of alcohol being used the wrong way. That would almost to me seem a deterrent. I'm never going to get near that. So tell us how you came around to deciding this was where you wanted to be.
So, yeah, I mean, as you said, I mean, growing up in Mitchell's Plain, you see a lot of things. You see like gender-based violence, alcohol abuse, drug abuse, and it's not a very pretty story. I will say that I enjoyed growing up there. It's an amazing place to stay, despite all of those things, and the people there are amazing as well. But, I saw those things. I saw a lot of young people going down wrong paths, just, doing things that I didn't want to do. And I think because I saw so much, bad things, I thought I didn't want that. That is the one thing I didn't want. And, I thought that I'd do whatever I needed to do to not turn out that way, or to not go down the same journey and path that I'd seen so many people with talent and opportunities and just great opportunities within them and talent, not use that. So I thought, do the opposite thing, learn, work hard, and just try to be a success and get away from that, basically. So yes, when I decided that I was going to do winemaking, I didn't have initially the best support. My family was like, what are you thinking? Do you have eyes? Can you see what's going on around you? But I will say I've had great support from my mother and my grandmother, and I still have it to this day. So, they're strong women, and they're women that is resilient, and they do what they have to do. And, I've probably just got inherited the same thing, and I did what I had to do. I learned, I put my head down, and I decided this is what I wanted to do. I think also because they didn't want me to do it. I was quite young back then, and a little rebellious. And I decided, I'm going to learn about winemaking. Lack of knowledge comes before man's fall. And instead of staying away from this thing, I decided to learn about it, to start to respect it, to absolutely just fall in love with the process of winemaking. And now it's so awesome because I get to teach other people about it whenever I meet them. You don't see a lot of young female of color winemakers out there. So people are, they're inquisitive, they ask questions, and just inspire others to drink wine and to learn about it and not to abuse the substance. Yeah.
That inspiration is shining through. Bubs Highland, or Mildred, to give her real name. Yay, hello, lovely. One of my favorites. The South African wine industry is lucky to have you. The future is bright and very exciting with you, your talent, and your smile at the helm. So thank you, Mildred Highland. Great to have you watching the show. And Harlow watching from the UK. I love Kiara's wines. Both her Chenins are superb, and what a great story and talent. I keep telling everyone it's a name to watch out for. I think more and more people are understanding that, and they're also understanding that you've got a real pedigree, which has got a number of important boxes to be ticked off through this journey of yours. And I think one of the most important ones, Kiara, was the Cape Winemakers Guild. I mentioned earlier in the show, we're speaking to some of the current protégés who are coming through that system at the moment. You were in that space not that long ago. Tell us a little bit about that program and the impact that it had on you and on your career.
Man, I really, really enjoyed the protégé program. Just being able to meet and liaise with these great winemakers. When you're studying winemaking, there's these names and they're like rock stars. And all of a sudden you enter the protégé program and you meet with these men, and they're actually so humble, and they're just open, and they share their knowledge and information. So it was a really, really amazing experience, and it allowed me as well to make some really strong connections. So the gentlemen and women that are in the Cape Winemakers Guild, the winemakers there, they still contact me today. One example is Charles Hopkins. We always talking. If I need help with something, he's someone that I can just call and say, oh, I need some help with this or some guidance in that regard. In wine, you're always learning. Every year is a new year with regards to vintage, and it's very humbling, which is what I love about it. So they just opened a lot of doors, experience, went from right down here to all the way up there with the Cape Winemakers Guild, and also the amazing tastings that you get to go to. I mean, it's incredible. You get to taste wines that I probably wouldn't be able to taste just on a regular day. So yeah, what an amazing experience. What amazing connections made as well. So absolutely stunning program.
Well, it's a program that has you as one of its poster success stories. Clark Truter, who's watching on Facebook. Hey, Kiara, we can't get enough of your wines. Thank you. And keep making them and more. Well, yeah, you got out of that program. You started making wine pretty quickly. You worked with a number of different people. You got a lot of different experiences. And then you met this surfer from Salt River who continues to believe Salt River is a great wine of origin space and bangs out some wine in the warehouse. It's wine that he does rather well. It's led into Brookdale. But before we get to that part of the story, tell me about first meeting up with Duncan Savage and getting the opportunity to work with this wonderful surfer boy maverick of the wine world.
So I actually met Duncan in my final year of studies. He was still working at Cape Point at the moment, and he presented a tasting to us. So that was our very first encounter or meeting. And then in the final year of my program, the protege program, I was looking for a job quite nervously actually. And he had just opened up his new wine. Well, at that time it was new winery in Salt River. So he was looking for an assistant or some help at the time, and I was looking for a job. And it was just, we had this dinner in Johannesburg with the Cape Winemakers Guild, and I thought, that's the night I'm going to corner him now and just be like, I'm going to work for you. And funny enough, he came to speak to me first, which was quite awesome, as luck would have it, I guess. And that was the beginning of us working together. And we worked together from the end of 17 up until about 19 when I moved over to Brookdale officially. And we still work together today. Yeah, which is great.
Working with somebody like Duncan doesn't just give you access to an extraordinary talent, and Duncan certainly is. It also gives you access to his way of making wine, which isn't one big estate and pulling in all the grapes. It's going and finding different places and finding different parcels and creating wine from all of those. How much did that element of what Duncan does open your eyes up to the wine world?
Well, Duncan, what I've learned from him and what's really stood out is that he's in the vineyards a lot. And that's where he makes wine. So he's out there a lot, special attention to detail and care with vineyards. And that's one thing I can say that I've adopted is that, wine is made in the vineyard. The better you know your soils, your vines, the easier it is to make wines in the cellar. Because the process is quite simple, but the small nuances, the small characteristics, those things, it's all you find out those things in the vineyard. So, and also Duncan has a fantastic network of people that he knows through his years in the industry as well. So I was also exposed to that, which was amazing.
I think it works both ways. I think Duncan will be the first to admit that he certainly learned a fair amount from his protege as well. I see Diana Martin is watching. Greetings from Portugal. Well, Dan, I hope you're enjoying the Kiara Scott story. You'll have some wine from Portugal to be trying with us just a little later on in the show. Denzel Jonathan Swartz is watching. Love Kiara Scott winemaking philosophy and her humbleness. I think that refers to you as well, Denzel, and lovely to have you watching the show. And then Helen Nicol, what a wonderful young woman. If she needs an extra older female relative in her life, just let me know. Kiara, I'm going to warn you here, just politely say no. That is my mother. She will drink all of your wine and be bankrupt at the end of the year. And then Grant Sauls is watching on YouTube. Great story from Kiara. I do enjoy Brookdale wine and well not. Well, let's plunge into that Brookdale story because it was via Duncan Savage that you found yourself out at Brookdale because he guided you out there and that kickstarted what has become this new and so exciting chapter of your life, Kiara.
Yes, so Duncan was consulting and still is consulting to Brookdale. And he started in 2017 when I actually started with him in Salt River. And Brookdale was beginning to grow and Savage itself is also growing. And Brookdale needed its own winemaker. I've been working with the wines since the very first vintage, got along with the people, and it was just this beautiful transition over from Savage to Brookdale. It just worked. I also think Duncan kicked me out I'm just kidding. Out of the cellar. But no, it was just this lovely, smooth transition over from Savage to Brookdale, and it just made sense. At the time, we were doing one wine, and now we've moved on to 4. So we needed someone, and I was that someone that they chose, thankfully, to move over and to take care of these vines and these wines. Yeah, that I'm really proud of.
And you now find yourself overseeing them and producing them. I'm going to taste the 2 of them in a moment. Let's look at the Brookdale side of the story, though, as opposed to the Kiara side of the story, because probably when you first saw it, it was not an overwhelmingly impressive space. It was overgrown, it was unkempt, it was in need of plenty of TLC, and it was exploring it and discovering things like old chenin vines hidden under undergrowth that I'd imagine gave you an inkling of what might be possible, what the potential really was at this.
Well, Brookdale, I like it to akin it to a Cinderella story. When the owner purchased the place in 2016, it was completely overgrown, as you said, dilapidated. You couldn't even see that there were vineyards there at the time. So it took a lot of clearing out. And then we found varieties on the estate there that was like Merlot, Cabernet, Muscat. But unfortunately, those varieties were virused. So we had to uproot everything and then started a replanting program in 2017 at the time. So we've subsequently replanted with varieties that come from the south of France and Portugal, which is great. Seeing that Portugal we're doing Portuguese wines tonight. So we've planted a 16 varietal whitefield blend. We're planting this year a 20 varietal red. We've planted varieties such as Marsanne, Roussanne, Petit Syrah, Grenache Noir. We're going to plant all four varieties of Grenache, which is Grenache Noir, Grenache Blanc, Grenache Gris, and Ladona Pelou as well. So we're doing a lot of exciting things on the estate, but it's all varieties that work well in the Paarl climate. We've rebranded, and just now we have this manor house as well. That's going to be a boutique hotel, or that is, and it's absolutely stunning. At the moment, we're busy building a winery, tasting room, and restaurant while planting. So there's a lot of exciting things happening at Brookdale and in Paarl at the moment, which is awesome because we're bringing Paarl back again, making Paarl cool again.
You certainly are, and all that's terribly exciting. One thing I just need to double check that I think maybe we lost connection there because for a moment it sounded like it said a 16 variety white and a 20 variety red. Have you been drinking, Kiara?
I mean, not enough. No. Not enough. No, that's what we're doing. So those blends are actually inspired by Portugal. That's why we decided to do that. So Tim, he's got family. His family goes to Portugal every now and again, and he's absolutely in love with the place, as well as South Africa. Hence, he's got the estate here. And so we've decided we're doing a 16 varietal white and a 20 varietal red. So this is our first vintage that we picked of the 16 varietal white. So hopefully in the near future, we'll have some exciting blends to share with you. Yeah.
I cannot wait for this sort of blind tasting with a series of very important wine drinkers. What do you think is in this wine? And what else? And what else? And what else?
Exactly.
That's
exactly.
properly done. Lisa Harlow's
stunningly complex.
Oh, I see Lisa Harlow's picked up on one of those saying a hairy Grenache in Paarl. I've only ever seen it in France and Spain, where it is rare too. All right, so some properly exciting wine on the horizon. I think there's some pretty exciting wine with us already, Kiara, because there's nobody who's tasted your wine who hasn't raised an eyebrow and go, this is nice. Where's this from? So let's have a crack at them. And the first of these, a wine I think I saw you describe as the best wine yet. Now, obviously, it's a short tenure, but it's still a nice accolade. This is your 2018 Chenin Blanc. Is this from some of those vines that you discovered under bush and had to dig out to show the world?
That's correct. So this block, at least, of Chenin is the only block that we've kept from the property. Everything else was uprooted. So this is the heritage of the estate. And a lot of care and attention to detail is going into this block. It was so dilapidated. So we're really working hard viticulturally just to bring these old vines back to their glory days, if I can put it that way. But the 2018, it's a really stunning wine. We had a warmer vintage in 2018. We were just coming out of the drought at that time, but it promotes good flavor and intensity in this wine. It's beautiful, medium yellow in color. It's full, it's bold, and it coats the palate really well. And this is the type of wine that does very well with any food dish. So this is our Brookdale 2018, and just made in a very simple, minimal intervention winemaking style, 100% fermented in oak, but larger, older barrels. So there's not too much oak intensity over here, just beautiful balance, a lovely salinity on the finish, and just a stunning textural wine.
Yeah, the fruit is definitely guiding the story of this. It's a wine that is 2018. Now, this year, we'll see most Chenin Blanc released as probably a 2020, some 2021. Yeah. Is this your current release? Have you kept it back until now?
So at the moment, we're selling 2018 in Johannesburg, yes.
I love that it's been given a little bit of extra time, and I'm going to give it a little more time because I've got the rest of the case, and I'm going to go and hide from my wife and ensure that I can drink in a few years' time. It's one of two wines we're drinking with you this evening, and it is the Mason Road. Before I jump onto the rosé, though, just the Mason Road name. I'm always fascinated as to the nomenclature of wine. Where does the Mason Road run? What is it? Where is it?
So when we were unearthing or clearing out on the estate, we found this old post road that leads up to the mountain over the Du Toitskloof. And it said that road dates back to 1807, and it was made by stonemasons. So I'm thinking it's before the N1, before the R101. How are you getting your messages across the mountain? And they would use these old post roads, and we just decided it was an apt name for our brand, our second label, which is the Mason Road range, which is our lifestyle range.
Yeah. And it's probably got a little more romance to it than the N1 as a name. So yes. Cool. The rosé's looking at me appealingly. I see Fabien Letiec saying, looks like it is a must to taste this Chenin. And then he follows up with a question. Is it possible to order your wine in Germany?
Yes, it is. We do have an importer in Germany. He's more than welcome to send us an email. You can go on our website at www.brookdaleestate.com, and you can contact us there, and I'll put you in contact with our importer.
There we go. All right. So, Fabien, make sure you order. I suspect you'll be rather happy with what arrives. That is the Chenin. You might, Fabien, also want to have a look at the rosé, because that is the second of our two wines. I find South African rosé, Kiara, in such a cool space at the moment in South Africa. And we're going to be talking about rosé in some detail in a few weeks' time with a special around International Rosé Day with a few of our producers. But it's not just a space where, as a consumer, I'm finding I'm getting a lot more out of rosé. There's a lot more subtlety, a lot more savouriness to it. It's no longer sweet and ghastly and horrible and aimed at 12-year-olds. It's got so much more appeal to it. But I also get the sense that for you guys as winemakers, you're having a lot of fun with rosé, taking different red grapes and throwing them in and creating something that's just a lot of fun to make. Is that right?
Oh, yes. I mean, this rosé, actually, it's got quite a story to it. I didn't think that I would be making rosé this soon, just because I didn't drink rosé before. But this wine really embodies its name, Serendipity, because we were standing in the vineyard in 2020, and we had this young block of Grenache because, you know, we have a lot of new blocks coming into play year on year. And we decided that there's no way that this Grenache in its infancy is going to make a serious red wine. And we decided, why not, you know, just play around with rosé. Let's see what happens. So we decided, okay, let's make some rosé. And then we added some Syrah and added some Cinsault, you know, just to kind of complete the package a little bit. And, you know, it's absolutely a wine that I'm really proud of. In 2020, as we all know, you know, there was COVID and all these things happened. But this is really the silver lining wine for me, a silver lining wine for me in 2020. It's one that I'm super proud of as our maiden vintage. And I think it's turned out really, really well.
It's a silver lining seen through rose-tinted glasses, if you'll excuse the cheap talk. It's a wine that Lisa Harlow says she's had recently. I had a bottle of your rosé last week. Absolutely beautiful, dry, fruity, and interesting, and such a pretty color. It certainly is. Run us through the grapes in here and what inspired the combination you've gone with to make up this rosé.
So it's Syrah, Grenache, and Cinsault, and just, you know, a rosé that's typical Provence in style. When our Mourvedre block comes into play in 2022, we'll add a little bit of that as well, just to make it full circle. So we just wanted that was a serious rosé, a rosé with intention. You know, we did a lot of different things with this wine. We did a whole bunch press. A portion of this wine was fermented in older French oak barrels as well. So you've got this beautiful weight on the palate. And it's not just tutti frutti, but it's got this hints of pomegranate, grapefruit as well. You know, it's got the beautiful salmon color that we wanted, and lovely floral undertones. And that was basically the intention with this wine. It's not just to have a rosé that you have to chill down and drink, but even if you were to drink it on its own, it's quite vinous, it's winey, and it's just a wine with intention, or rosé with intention, let me say.
I struggle to see the improvement, but Mourvedre will certainly be an interesting addition. So we'll compare it in 12 months' time or thereabouts when it has come out. See Pomquanazi, Cinsault always adds that thing to a rosé. And Lisa Harlow, it's no wishy-washy Provence rosé, Cap Provençal storming ahead of the Cape. It's also got just that almost little hint of kind of strawberry sherbet finish right at the end. Oh, I want some more. It goes through very, very nicely. You told us a little earlier before we let you go that you've got, Kiara, the hotel coming. There's the new cellar, the wine tasting space, the airstrip, the Olympic swimming pool, the golf course, all the things you're putting together. It's terribly, terribly exciting from an estate perspective. But first and foremost for you will always be the wine itself. We've got the four. We know you're doing blends with every grape you can find on the planet and putting them together, which also sounds really cool. What else next few years? Where are you looking to take the Kiara Scott story and intertwined with it the Brookdale wine story?
Oh man, that's a bit of a difficult one, I think, for now. I don't want to be premature, but yeah, you know, at the moment, just to produce the best wines off of this estate, there's still so much to learn. Every day I go to work and I learn something new, which is a great place to be. It's no longer just winemaking and viticulture, but now it's also building a cellar, construction, all of these things. So it's just, at the moment, me getting through this phase with the estate, and then we go up. So one step at a time, and that's how we get there. But just produce the best wines from the site. Wine of origin, Paul, to get us on the map, not just Brookdale, but also our area. Yeah, that's me for now.
Simple and determined philosophy, all wrapped up in a natural gift for making wine. Kiara, thank you so much for the time. The wine is terrific. Your story even more so. I know there's a long, long way to go, but thanks for the time this evening. And I promise that we'll be down to have a look at Brookdale, to have a look at all the developments, and to taste your 61 variety white and your 82 variety red just as soon as we can.
Thank you very, very, very much, Dan. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Kiara Scott, the winemaker down at Brookdale in Pal, from Mitchell's Plain, not where you'd expect to get a great winemaker emerging, now blazing a trail for winemakers, for women, for Pal, for Mitchell's Plain. Just so many terrific stories, all wrapped up in one. And joining us as a very special guest on the show with her Brookdale Chenin and that Mason Road Serendipity rosé. Expect much more wine and many more accolades to be heading the way of what could be Mitchell Plain's greatest export yet. All right, so super way to kick off the show. Let's leave Mitchell's Plain via Pal and head off to Portugal via Johannesburg for the second half of today's show. Thursday night, I'm going to be down at Séjour at the Houghton. It is a restaurant that is overseen by a very exciting young chef who's traveled the world and is now happily back in South Africa. He's got a few great gigs behind him, but this is his most personal yet. And on Thursday night, he'll be producing some Portuguese food with some rather nice Portuguese wine to go with it. The wine is delivered by Anton Pispeki from Wines of the World. The chef is Freddie Diaz from Séjour at the Houghton. Gentlemen, good evening. Welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine.
Evening, Dan. Thank you for having us.
Good evening, everyone. Hello.
There we go. Great to have you both, gentlemen. Thank you. Welcome to the show. Welcome to a celebration of Portugal. And it is a country that I've got a very close relationship with, which I'll share with both of you, as well as our many viewers watching at the moment, in that although I met her in Barcelona, my now wife and I were on a holiday with friends that kicked off really in the Algarve. And so the first week we spent getting to know each other, and in her case, falling hopelessly in love, which is completely understandable, was spent in Portugal. And while she was falling in love with me, I was falling in love with Portuguese food and wine, which I discovered were both very inexpensive and particularly good. So I'm always happy to drink Portuguese wine and to eat Portuguese food. And let's kick off with a sense of that food. Freddie, the name Freddie Diaz sounds like it could be Portuguese. You certainly got the look of somebody who might have emerged from somewhere in Greater Portugal. Are there Portuguese roots? And if not, is there a particular affiliation with the Portuguese culture, with Portuguese food, Freddie?
Well, yes, as you guessed, Freddie Diaz my name is Portuguese. I am Portuguese. So I was born and raised in Johannesburg, but two Portuguese parents. Both of my parents were from Mozambique, and my grandparents and the rest of my extended family is all from Portugal. So yeah, and Portugal, whilst obviously I'm a sort of very proud South African and born and raised here, Portugal's very important to me in terms of my heritage, and like visiting my grandparents there was always very special. And I mean, I even lived and worked there for a very brief period as well. So yeah, I do love Portugal, and it's a very special place.
It's also a place with very special food. I have a closer relationship than any other country to Greece, my wife being Greek. And whether it's Greece, it's Italy, it's Spain, it's Portugal, the thread that runs through the Mediterranean countries is a simplicity of food, not overcomplicating food, using natural ingredients, bringing these together in harmony, and just creating stuff that is so difficult not to finish the entire plate off, which always makes me wonder why the entire Mediterranean population isn't grossly overweight. They've, I suppose, just got far more staying power and resistance than I do. How has that Portuguese food influenced the career of Freddie Diaz and the food that's seen you not just cook in France and travel around the world, but also cook at the Potluck Club and work at Basalt and have these really great modern kitchens to have been part of?
Yeah, look, I mean, sort of as you said, it's that sort of thread of the Mediterranean. Even though officially Portugal is not on the Mediterranean, but it's kind of it. We still have that sort of Mediterranean diet. And growing up, my mother was an incredible cook, and she was really passionate about her food, and she was equally as passionate about feeding her family. And it's kind of where it started. It started with my mom. I learned how to sort of like I watched her cook as a child, and getting the family together at the table, and we're all together, and discussing how our day was, and it taught me that food sort of brings people together. Food sort of unites people, and there's so much more to it than just nourishment or just filling your belly. Food is such an incredible thing. And I think that's kind of where the bug kind of bit me when I was a kid, because I wanted to be a chef since I could remember. And straight after high school, I went straight to Prulith. I enrolled in Prulith, and never looked back. It was always something I've always been very passionate about. It's led to a very awesome career. Like, I've had such a wonderful life because of this. I've got to travel the world. I've got to see, almost 40 different countries, and I've worked in 4, and it's just been so incredible to just like I said, the world of food has created such a wonderful life. And it's not been an easy one. Being a chef is obviously, it's not the easiest job in the world, but it's it's a labor of love, and it's a job that requires passion and a lot of love in order to do it, and to do it well. So yeah, that's it.
Well, it's a career that has now brought you to Séjour at the Houghton, where I've had a number of very pleasant meals. And I've got another one on the horizon for Thursday. We'll jump into that in a second. Let's go to the wine side of things. And Anton, who has for some time now been supplying South Africans with an exotic array of wine from around the world, including wine from Portugal. And if I go back to that trip I mentioned a moment ago, Anton, when I was in Portugal in the Algarve, I remember going down to the local supermarket and watching everybody else on the trip buy Portuguese wine, and me being far too good to drink Portuguese wine, spending 10 times the price on French wine, then running out of my Bordeaux, trying some of their €2 Portuguese wine, and discovering it was much better than the stuff I'd spent a fortune on. And I think that speaks to what I love about Portuguese wine. It's often maybe on that slightly more robust side, but it's probably one of the more underrated wine producing nations we have.
Well, good evening. That's absolutely correct. And if I might add to it, in my past, I was peddling French wine, especially Grand Crus, until I tried the Portuguese wines, and that's when the bug bit me. And we, together with a company that's been around now since 1969, decided to be kind of specifically a Portuguese wine go-to guys. So that is what we have been doing for 30, 40, 50 years. And that's what we're going to be continuing doing it. And it's been a fascinating journey, because Portugal is kind of, for me, undoubtedly the best value for money country in the world when it comes to wine. Obviously, they were in 2020 the highest consumption country per capita, so they drink the most, bypassing the mighty France and Spain and Italy. And I always say to my Portuguese friends, when you have a half Croatian, half Hungarian from Serbia promoting Portuguese wines in South Africa, then you're making good wines.
It's a multicultural affair. I'll certainly agree with you on the best value wine in Europe. I still think South Africa holds the flag for best value wine on the planet, but Portuguese wine is both extremely good value, but also one of many wines that I really feel we must, as South Africans, try, not because we don't like or don't support or don't promote our own wines, but it is so important to have a bit of perspective on how we shape up against wine from the rest of the world, and how we compare with what other people are making. And if we look at what Portugal are making, probably wine that people might be watching watching going, but hang on, this is Portugal, Anton. Portugal makes port and Portugal makes Madeira. That's what they make. Surely they don't make other wine. And yet, as we're about to see now, as we'll see at the dinner on Thursday, as I saw in the Algarve 12 years ago now, this is a country where it's well beyond just the port and the Madeira, and there is a very broad, very inclusive winemaking history that's giving a whole array of wine.
Well, that's exactly the truth. I mean, what has happened in Portugal, it's pretty much quite similar what happened in South Africa as well, especially in Swartland region. Because back in the days, Portugal was known for two types of wine. You had your Vinho Verdes, and then you had your Port and Madeira. And that's it. Anything that was in between it was kind of a gray area. And the youngsters that finished their studies, obviously they said, listen, well, Portugal is much more than just Vinho Verde and Port. And they started pushing the boundaries and creating wines that really worked. The world kind of stood up and took notice of it because of the quality and affordability. So very similar to Swartland, what the young guns and everything, the Molyneux and Savages did for the South African wines internationally. That's pretty much what Portuguese young winemakers started doing for Portugal. And obviously people started noticing, and ultimately, when it comes to wine, you're always looking for the next best deal. I mean, you can Google the Grand Crus, you can go to Wine Searcher, you press enter, you're going to be charged 10, 20,000 Rand. A week later, the DHL or UPS will deliver your wines. And what was the challenge? There's no challenge behind it. The challenge is to find the best wine and pay as less as possible. And that's when the Portugal as a country started being noticed.
Well, it's a wine and a food extravaganza we have on Thursday. I'm going to run through that wine with Anton in just a moment. Let's jump back quickly, though, to Chef Freddie and the food and wine at hand. Give us, Freddie, a sense of your philosophy as a chef in terms of food and wine, how you go about approaching those day-to-day service at Séjour. It's fine, you've got your dishes and it's up to your sommelier to suggest, but here's a night where you're going, right, we've got specific wine, we need food that's going to bring the best out of the wine without overpowering it and without the wine overpowering the food. So you've got a slightly different challenge from what might be the one you have most days. How do you approach that?
I mean, you start with the wine, I suppose. So you for this particular occasion, I tasted the wines a couple of weeks ago, and it was quite it was quite exciting because I'd never tasted. I've had wines from Portugal before many times, but not these particular ones. And I mean the white wine that we'll be doing, the Amphora White, is I think it's a blend of 5 different wines, all of 5 varietals, all varietals I've never heard of in my life. So it was like a challenge there to start off with, because I'm tasting things for the first time, but that's also super exciting. But the other region was the other way I approach it was also just sort of understanding where the wine comes from, and it was sort of easy knowing that I was going to create Portuguese dishes around that, or use something fairly traditional, or based on traditional dishes. And it's the wines come from the Alentejo region of Portugal, which is where my grandfather comes from. And it's also probably my favorite region in Portugal in terms of food. The food of Alentejo is, it's sort of it's a poorer region of Portugal, so and like sort of many great food countries, it's those regions, the sort of poorer regions, that end up creating the best dishes, because they use what they have and they get creative and they make something. So I based all the dishes around that food from that region, from Alentejo. And it was just kind of like, I suppose it's being in the industry for so many years, and you do food and wine pairings often, you kind of just you taste the wine and you kind of work backwards from there and figure, like, this will work with this dish or this sauce or this protein, and that's how it was. So I already had an idea of sort of the region that it was from, the dishes that I wanted to base it on, and then kind of just work it around there and see if it worked, and it did. So.
Well, let's find out about this wine from Anton. Anton, you're going to have to do some translation for me. This is the wine in question, the Rostim, Herdade do Rochim. I probably pronounced that incorrectly, which is the white blend. Antau Vaz is 40%, Perum 20%, Rabo de Ovelha is 20%, and Mantoedo is 20%. Tell me just a little bit about these grapes, but give us, in as much as you can, a comparison as to what they might be like in terms of grapes that we're a little more familiar with in South Africa, Anton.
That's interesting. I mean, every time when I do my presentations, I always tell to people, okay, so now press Control Alt Delete. Let's reset the palette, because Portugal has got over 290 indigenous grape varietals, and none of them are Merlot, Cab, Shiraz, Sauvignon, Chardonnay, none of them. So all the wines or all the grapes that you have in Portugal are indigenous grape varietals. So it's actually quite difficult and quite challenging to compare them with the grape varietals that we are familiar here in South Africa. So most of those grapes in Portugal are indigenous. Some of them are being used in and around the world, like for instance Touriga Nacional's available even in South Africa, Calisdorp everywhere, Alvarinho as well. Springfield, Newton Johnson are using those two grape varietals. By the way, those two grape varietals are now available or allowed to be grown in Bordeaux because they love the heat. So due to the climate change, they are now included in grape varietals that are allowed to be grown in Bordeaux. So very difficult to compare because there is not a lot of similarity between the white grape varietals, the Chenin, Chardonnay, that we kind of used to here in South Africa. And if you go through Portuguese wines, 90% of them are always blends. They blend the grapes purely because that gives them an opportunity to have the consistency throughout the year and have the same quality in every year going on and on and on.
It is a wine that's going to be kicking off the first dish. It is a blend, and it's almost got the closest I can come up with. There's a kind of almost a hint of Verdalho, that slightly thicker, slightly viscous white that's full of aromatics, and I think it's going to give a lot of fun to Freddie for his first dish. In terms of this Portuguese wine, if I arrived at a local village tavern, taverna, Greek style, I'm not sure what you call it in Portugal, is this kind of what I'd be finding by the glass on the wine list?
Perhaps you would. The only interesting fact about this particular wine is Pedro, a friend of mine who owns the Herdade do Rochim, which is the winery in Alentejo. He took upon himself a couple of years ago to literally go back to his roots, because the wine is called amphora. So the fermentation is being done exactly the same way, and they made the wine exactly the same way as they did 2,000 years ago. Back in the days, you had no access, or they have no technology to make oak barrels, so they use clay. And this wine is made purely in clay, without any intervention from man whatsoever. Harvest the grapes, put it in, fermentation starts, leave it. There's no temperature control, there's no added yeast, all yeast is natural. So this is one of those wines that it has really been made in exactly the same way as they've made it before. The alcohol being 12%, there's no wood, tannins are soft, fruit forward. Very, very interesting wine, and very sort of quirky, something that you perhaps never tried before. And Freddie did an amazing job previously when we did the food and wine pairing. So I'm sure that on Thursday we'll experience exactly the same.
Well, let's find out from the chef. You've got a white wine that's got a fairly strong ridge of acid to it. There is no oak there at all. It's been done in the clay amphora, so it's fruit leading it all the way through. What do you dish up, Chef Freddie?
So what I am doing for the first course is a very traditional dish called a Séjour à bouillon pâte, which is basically clams. It's clams that are cooked in white wine, lemon, and lots of coriander. And the coriander is so like beautifully aromatic in the with the lemon and the wine, and it kind of works just really well with that super fruit forward, as you say, quite viscous wine. There's almost like an oiliness to the wine as well, which works quite well with the seafood. And I'm pairing it. I'm using some West Coast white mussels, just because they are a type of clam. They are a species of clam, and they are fresh that you can and available here in our country. So that's also another sort of important thing for me. Is I like to do dishes that are traditional and that sort of honor the classic dishes of another country, but I really enjoy and like get a kick out of using ingredients from this country. So from the country that I'm in. So, instead of me trying to get Atlantic clams, which will probably be frozen and it won't really be quite as good, I'll use the white mussels in the South African white mussels. So it's adding our own little South African like twist to it as well, which is the whole point of this dinner is, yes, I'm Portuguese. And yes, we're celebrating Portugal Day, which is on Thursday. You asked earlier. Portugal Day is on Thursday, which is why we are doing it on Thursday. But it's also to sort of also showcase that I am a South African, a South African Portuguese chef, and I like to showcase the products that we have at our doorstep, which I think is really important. And and when you're using good ingredients like that, it's not that hard to make delicious food.
All right. The starter sounds fascinating. Loads of coriander with the fresh mussels. It's the white wine, though, that I think you're really going to have an eyebrow raised by, just because it's going to be very different to anything you've had in South Africa. The red wine, though, might strike a chord or two of familiarity if you've had either at a Calitzdorp or up to the west coast, somewhere like Alles Verloren, the Touriga Nacional. And that is what we have got here. Wine number 2. Is there a massive difference, Anton, between the Touriga Nacional we will have drunk here in South Africa and the one you're presenting us with on Thursday night from Herdade de Rothin?
Well, to be honest with you, the regions that grow Touriga Nacional here in South Africa are very similar to the regions in Portugal, especially to Douro. And if you're talking about Calitzdorp and the guys from Boplas and all the other ones, so it's very similar. Touriga Nacional, as much as it is the Portuguese indigenous grape varietal, has been grown around the world, from Europe to South Africa to Australia, even California. So the grape varietal is a robust one. It's a strong one. Somebody's even comparing it to the cabs of this world, because it gives you a potential of long-term aging. The yield is quite small, but the berries are very, very powerful. And Dorocim Touriga Nacional is slightly different to your typical Douro Touriga Nacional, which is kind of mainly used in a port production. This one tends to be a bit more fruit driven. But there is a reasonable amount oak to it as well, about 11 months in a French oak, and then further a couple of months in a bottle. It's a 2018 vintage. It's a wine that will, without any problems, go a decade plus when it comes to aging. Obviously, provided you're not keeping next to the pizza oven, that reduces the aging potential. But yes, the Touriga Nacional is very similar to the South African Touriga Nacionals that we are growing here and making making good wines out of it as well.
A wine with a lovely rich dryness to it. What will it lend itself to on the plate? Back to our chef, Freddie. What's the magic of course two?
So this Touriga was when I first tasted it. It's a varietal that I have tasted very often, simply because we make quite a lot of it here in this country. We produce a lot of Touriga Nacionals in this country, but the Tourigas that I've had from here tend to be quite big. They're quite robust. They're very punchy. Whereas I found this one, this Rosim one, to be a little bit more elegant. A little bit a little bit understated, but like still very fruit forward. So I didn't want to pair this with anything too. I didn't want to pair it with anything sort of too rich, but I decided to do a traditional dish called chamfana de borrego, which is basically a lamb stew, which is lamb that's been braised in red wine, with a little bit of smoked paprika and a few spices. But how I'm doing it on Thursday is going to be sort of a little bit more like elevated, if you will. So I'm doing a braised lamb shoulder with a lamb loin as well, and I'm doing, again, to throw in just sort of that little South African twist, I'm doing a maize meal, a very soft maize meal sauce, using a Portuguese cheese in the maize meal, and serving it with some delicious baby turnips and a turnip top pesto, because in Portugal we love cooking with turnip tops. They're called grelos in Portugal, and they're very common in most Portuguese tables. It's kind of the greens you would eat with dinner. So I figured I'm just going to do that, but obviously just present it in a slightly more elegant and fitting way for Séjour.
It sounds absolutely fabulous, and it sounds like that would probably finish me off. It's already two terrific courses, but wait, there's more. One last one, and just before we wrap up, because we're almost out of time. When I had a first look, I thought, crikey, you must have got this wrong, Anton, but then I had a closer look at it, and no, you certainly haven't. Port, as we know in South Africa, or port-style wine, they are dark, and they are thick, and they are rich, and they're somewhere between sort of congealed blood and freshly discovered crude oil. This is none of that. This is white port. This is very strange, Anton. Tell me about this.
Okay, so yes, this is white port. Because you have, your stock standard ruby and tawnies. Some quintas make rosé, and then you have white ports. Now, white port can be either sweet or dry. It's made exactly the same way: harvest, fermentation, add aguardente or brandy, drain, age, bottle, etc. Now, the beauty about a white port, it can be served in a couple of different ways. I'm sure 99.9% of South Africans are familiar with the concept of G&T, which is gin and tonic, and they drink a lot of it. So walk into the bottle store, you'll see huge amount of different gins. White port is called P&T, so you drink port and tonic. The beauty about white port, or the dried white port and tonic, is port is only 19.5% alcohol. So if you want your afternoon to last much longer, then you drink P&T. If you want to go down quicker, then you drink G&T. Choice is yours. I always prefer my day to last much longer, so I prefer to have my gin, my port and tonic instead of gin and tonic. So that is your white port, less in sugar, way less in sugar than your normal port. But then you can also drink it on ice or on rocks, like a whiskey. We started promoting port and tonic 2 years ago, and let me tell you something: the Sendeman white port and tonic is something for Sunday afternoon next to the swimming pool. Okay, granted, now it's a bit cold to do that, but you can sit in your lounge and you can pour yourself and imagine being 30 plus degrees outside.
It's certainly not going to be that on Thursday night when we sit down with Freddie at dinner. Joburg is freezing. If you just tuned in, that's why I'm wearing one of my ski tops to get through the night. Freddie, this is something so different for us in South Africa. It's part cocktail mixer, part porters. We've never seen it before. What do you throw together to get the best out of this as a dessert?
So I'm basically just putting together 3 little Portuguese pastries that I think are quite different and that no one has sort of ever seen or heard of before. And that's kind of the reason why I wanted to do this. So I used to work at a bakery in Lisbon a few years ago, and these are all little desserts or little pastries and delicacies that I used to do at the bakery. And I purposefully did not put pastéis de nata because that's what everyone knows. And whilst they are amazing and delicious, I wanted to give the guests on the night something different. So the first one is the jesuitas, which is a little puff pastry with an almond cream inside, and then baked with flaked almonds and a little bit of a crispy sugar crust, which is really, really, really delicious. Then I'm doing bolas de Berlim, which literally translates to Berlin balls. It's basically a Berlin style donut that was brought to Portugal by Jewish refugees, and then over the years the Portuguese kind of adapted it to their own way, and it's stuffed with like an almond custard, which is sort of the Portuguese kind of twist to it. And that's what we'll be serving. And then pão de ló. And pão de ló is basically a very, very light sponge cake. And I'll be serving them in small little rounds, almost like a French Madeleine. And that a pão de ló is just, it's super, super light and airy, and flavored with a little bit of vanilla and lemon. So it's a nice light way to finish off the meal. And it's also a nice way to, enjoy a glass of port.
And a glass of port you probably won't have had the like of before. There's sort of a bit of almond biscotti and bitters on that nose, and then into a wine that's very light for what you normally expect for port. And you know what? Come along on Thursday and try some out. Or if not, stick your head in. I know Pick n Pay's got some of the Portuguese wine from Wines of the World. Great place to try a little wine from another country and see how it shapes up with your favourite South African as we broaden our understanding of this wonderful world of wine we find ourselves in. Freddie, Anton, thank you both very much for being part of this evening. Freddie, looking forward to the food. Anton, looking forward to the wine on Thursday, where I'll see you both at Séjour. Just quickly, Freddie, are there any spots available? And if so, how do people book?
Yeah, there's still spots available. The best way to book is through our website, Séjour, séjour.co.za, and just book through Dine Plan. That's probably the easiest way. I mean, you can even you can phone the Houghton Hotel and get through to Séjour, and we can make a booking, telephonically through there as well. But yeah, I would say booking online is probably the easiest way to go to do it.
All right, there you go. Freddie will be there. Anton will be there. I will be there, tucking in to Portuguese food and Portuguese wine with great gusto. Gentlemen, thank you very much for the time. Really appreciate the education and looking forward to a lovely night with you both on Thursday. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Go. Freddie Dias and Anton Pispeki together putting on a celebration of Portugal. It's Portugal Day on Thursday. So remember, if you are coming to the dinner, it's not your usual Cologne, not your usual Bulgari. It's a little bit of Nando's behind each ear, and away you go. And you'll be good for a night and Portugal. Helen Nicol, my dear mum, I think this could be my perfect meal. That does refer to about 100 or so, but this is definitely one of them. I'll send you some photos, mum. It's going to be a great night out on Thursday. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Thank you not just to Freddie and Anton, but also to the wonderful Kiara Scott, who was with us a little earlier on this evening. That Brookdale story, as well as her own story, just fabulous. And remember, if you aren't already, you must become part of the Pick n Pay Wine Club. Simply send your smart shopper number by SMS through to 36775, and you will free of charge be part of a club that gets you 3 times the smart shopper points on all wine, 20% off 10 great wines every single month. And you will also get the chance to have some great evenings out, including coming up an evening with Paul Kluver. That's on the 24th of June. Look out for information from Pick and Pay soon. And at the moment, if you buy any bottle of Simonsach, anyone at all, you'll go into a draw to win over 5,000 Rand worth of wine from Simonsach, with whom we are celebrating 50 years of Cup Classique in South Africa. They gave us the first one in 1971, and they're still making exceptional wine. Over 5,000 Rands worth of it could be yours. Thank you for joining us. Remember that on Thursday, we'll have some of the young proteges from the Cape Winemakers Guild products. The next Kiara Scott will be with us on Thursday, and we'll also be chatting to Michael Fridjon about the Old Mutual Wine Trophy in South Africa. Enjoy the rest of the evening, enjoy your week, keep drinking and supporting South African wine and the occasional glass of Portuguese. I'll see you again Thursday. Good night and cheers.